economy to actually grow forward and actually create jobs, which is why my basic income program, my suggestion will actually alleviate that problem in a significant manner. If you're asking me what the federal government can do to actually help, this is a first step.
We need to look at the big picture here. To get to the new economy, we still will need natural resources. You can't build windmills without steel or solar panels without aluminum. What we need to do is put the hard limits. It's not negotiable. We have to meet our international obligations to diminish the carbon imprint.
There are two things that we have to get out of Alina right away. First of all, the dispute mechanism, which means that companies have more power than individual states. We have to get rid of that because there's no other country in the world that uses this mechanism so often as our two countries. Also, the proportionality mechanism that was put into NAFTA, that must be scrapped. I want a fair trade agreement in North America, a free trade agreement which sets out ties between the three countries based on a common struggle against climate change. That's the type of agreement that I think that all New Democrats would support. Future jobs, jobs of the future. First of all, the knowledge-based economy. This is why I'm advocating for the scrapping of tuition fees, because these are the workers of the future who can work in the economy based on knowledge. Now, secondly, to stimulate the export sector, we must export not just raw materials but finished projects, and then green energy, which is booming across the world. What we see is that other countries are creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs, and we can see that. We can see just how much prosperity that can bring.
We all agree here about the need to fight income inequality, about the need to fight climate change. How we'll do it is really properly explained. If we want to gain the hearts of Canadians, we'll need to gain their trust, and that's the way to do it.
I think, and Peter, in terms of that, again, we're going to be going into the NAFTA negotiations. We need people who aren't afraid to stand up for our economy. Why are we talking about the concessions we're going to put on the table? You don't go into tough negotiations by speculating. Again, Brian Mulroney, God help us, he's already putting supply management on the table. What's with that? We need to be standing up for Canadian values because the world looks to us at times like this. We have to deliver.
In Canada, as elsewhere in the world, the gulf between the poorest and the richest continues to widen. What policies should the NDP put forward to reduce inequality in Canada? Mr. Angus and Mr. Caron, you have the floor now. Well, this is another opportunity to talk about basic income. The economy has been restructured. We now face an economy which needs to be restructured again, but it'll take time also. There's a lot of tech change going on. People are victims of this change. This means that we need to provide support. We need to make sure the support at the provincial and federal level continues to be there. This is why basic income is a main issue for me. It's a priority for me.
And so the reality is that people where I come from are very concerned about the loss of value-added jobs, including in a lot of communities across the country. But people want a government that's going to stand up for them. But they also want to make sure that we have a government that's looking out at climate change and recognizing that good jobs can come from investing in infrastructure, from investing in green energy, and recognizing that the public and social ownership is key in job creation. Great.
Reverse the neoliberal agenda. It's because of the policies of privatization, of deregulation also, and free trade agreements, and that we've lost so many jobs across the land. So I think it's now high time to stand up to put in place a job creation strategy, good jobs. And this means that we must value the public sector. We must do what we said in our call to action. We must show the leadership that only NDPs are capable of showing. So we'll undoubtedly have to renegotiate the NAFTA agreement. Could you list the changes that you'd like to make during those negotiations? I'll start if you like. Mr. Angus. I'm sorry. Well, this is a very important issue. This week, I visited Ingersoll workers in their plant. Now, that plant is more than profitable. It's right next to the GM plant, but they decided to export 600 jobs to Mexico in the wake of the 2008 crisis. The workers invested in their pensions. They helped General Motors, and Canadians provided a lot of subsidies to help General Motors out. And now General Motors has decided to export those jobs to Mexico. The same thing is happening with Bombardier. They're sending jobs to Mexico as well, but they've received subsidies from the Canadian government as well. Now, when it comes to renegotiating NAFTA, it's essential, it's crucial, really, to have a Prime Minister who will be ready to defend the jobs and the vision of our country and our workers. It's as simple as that, I think. Ms. Ashton, well, I would say, as I said earlier, that it's because of NAFTA and other free trade agreements like this that we find ourselves in this current situation. Free trade agreements which have led to us losing good manufacturing value-added jobs. It's meant that we're not able to build a better future for all of us. We need a government with leadership on the issue of jobs, good jobs. We must defend Canadian jobs, protect Canadian jobs, so we must defend Canadian interests as well. This is what Justin Trudeau is failing to do. Someone who likes to spend time with CEOs of big oil in Houston, who is applauded by those companies, is someone who won't promote our own message and won't stand up to Donald Trump. He won't stand up for good jobs in our country either. Only the NDP can stand up to Mr. Trump to protect jobs in Canada. And so if you talk about free trade and fair trade, that's what we want. Well, if you want that, you must have an agreement to create a framework for that. The analysis done by the NDP is based on three things: the respect for human rights, environmental rights, and workers' rights as well. It must be an agreement which is reciprocal. We must get the same access as the country that we're negotiating with. We must make sure that Canada is a winner at the end of the day. These are the main principles.
The question is, if you were elected leader in October, what steps would you take to ensure that the party is election ready for 2019? Nikki Ashton, you'll be the first to speak.
Well, this is a very important question because we do have to have our sights on 2019. But I want to take a moment to just say that it's not just about the next election. We need to build a movement for fundamental change. And that means getting on board and putting forward a progressive, bold vision that's based on our principles as New Democrats, to reconnect with that vision, to be proud of being a left-wing party, but to also work with people that may have distanced themselves from our party, that are involved with social movements, activists, many young activists, many who are in this room, who are putting their energies into fighting for justice in different ways. We need to reconnect. We need to build a movement for social, environmental, and economic justice. And we need to make it clear that that means investing in organizing. That means supporting amazing candidates that are putting their names forward. And I do want to give a shout out to Emily Tamman, who is running here in Vanier. That means respecting our grassroots and taking the time to listen to riding associations, to people that work day in, day out, believing in the NDP. That means being, feeling the need to get out of maybe our safe zone, a zone that we've been in for too long, and say that we aren't just a party that's here to win elections. We are a party that's here to effect political change for 2019 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Julian?
I completely agree with Nikki, and I would add that what we have to do is use the wisdom of our membership. NDP activists have an enormous contribution to make, and I don't think we ask enough of the membership base to get that important feedback about where we go as a party. Secondly, we have to have, following this convention and the election of a new leader, the largest conversation in our history with Canadians. We have to go out throughout this country and talk to Canadians where they are found, on the doorstep in the workplace. Everywhere they are, we should be. And we have to ensure that we are reaching out to diverse communities. I represent one of the most diverse communities in the country, and I believe strongly that we have to reach out right across the length and breadth of this land. And we have to work very closely with social movements. That's where many of us come out of. And those social movements provide so much energy to where we can go as a party. We have to be bold. We have to be thoughtful. We have to make sure that Canadians know that an NDP government will take us to a much better place than what we've seen from the two old parties. People threw out Mr. Harper expecting Mr. Trudeau to be different. Mr. Trudeau has not been very much different. He's not really a progressive. He plays one on TV, but he hasn't been the kind of leader that Canadians seek. The NDP has to be that movement.
I went in to watch the hockey game at the local sports bar. Kim, the bartender, came up to me. She's putting her son through law school on tips. And she looked at me and she said, "What the hell happened to you guys? You're supposed to be our voice. We believe in you." And that, to me, is what the renewal is about. We have to go out. And we have all, you know, we're the party with the boxes of policies and the great ideas. But we have to go out and rebuild that relationship because more and more people are tuning out. And I think that there's a real opportunity to be that authentic voice. And you know, one thing I take positive from 2015 is Canadians voted for what they thought was a progressive, positive change in Mr. Trudeau. I think that that is very hopeful that they did that. But the question is he's not following through. And cynicism becomes the greatest danger in the political world right now if people stop believing. We have to go out and we got to do a lot of hard work of reaching people that we haven't talked to before and let them know why they really belong in a much bigger New Democratic Party tent. Thank you.
If you were elected leader and win government in 2019, you will need to work with the United States as Canada's largest trading partner. How would you do that? Peter Julian and Charlie Angus, you have the floor.
Well, I believe that Donald Trump will be gone by 2020. Because we've seen right across the United States that there is a significant mobilization of people who may not have even participated in the last American election, but they're stepping forward and they're speaking up and they're speaking out. And so, for that, I think it's very clear that we have to make a distinction between most Americans who did not vote for Mr. Trump and his very hateful actions and his very hateful statements. Most Americans did not vote for him, which means that we can continue to work with the United States and with the states on things like clean energy, where the United States is moving ahead of Canada in many respects, and also in reviving manufacturing and value added. That's something that Americans want to see, and many businesses on both sides of the border interact. So there are grounds where we can work together, but we do have to speak out against all forms of hate, including his statements and his actions.
Well, I would say, Peter, I don't know if you agree, Peter, with what I'm about to say, but I think we all agree that reform of the tax system is required. But we also need to be bold. We need to be bold to stand up to those who are rich, who have held the reins of power for decades. We have to make sure that we have a system that we change the system. It's currently a system that makes them richer, makes everyone else poorer. We have to put forward this policy. We have the right policies. We've been doing some extraordinary work in the House, but Canadians are wondering who will be bold enough to say enough is enough. We must move forward. We need leadership, and I think the NDP are in a good position to provide that leadership. We have to be bold enough to say no to the top 1% today, to say no to the status quo, which has created greater inequality.
In each language, and once again, you'll have 90 seconds to respond. Here's your question. What do you think makes New Democrats different from Liberals? We're going to start with you, Peter Julian.
Guts and courage.
Charlie Angus.
I think what has moved me and the reason I bought myself a $100 suit and put my name forward to run in 2004 was because the NDP have your back in tough times.
Nikki Ashton.
Well, what makes us different? The fact that we're principled.
Guy Caron.
The main difference is that we say what we mean and we mean what we say.